Then I slid the entire file back into the interoffice envelope and sent it upstairs. 2 hours later, I received a one-line email from Janet Grayson. "We stand by your call. Thank you. No debate, no defensiveness, no pushback." That simple acknowledgement tasted better than any apology they could have mustered. That night, I ate dinner alone in the rooftop cafeteria. Same food. Different view. The cashier smiled like he recognized me but wasn't quite sure from where. I just nodded politely and sat in the far corner, sipping coffee and watching the office lights flicker on across the skyline. As I stirred in a packet of sugar, I noticed a familiar figure at the terrace door. Helen, the receptionist. The same woman who used to greet me with, "Good morning, Ms. Thompson," every day before my badge deactivated in that elevator. She approached slowly, cautiously. "I read the article," she said, voice low. "I'm glad you came back." I nodded. "Me too." She hesitated, then asked, "Does it feel different?" I looked out at the city again. The glass shimmered with winter light. "It feels clear," I said, like standing in a room after the lies finally left. The next morning, I signed off on a new ethics code draft, implemented a third-party audit requirement, mandatory quarterly training for executives, including board members. No one questioned it. No one even suggested edits. Funny how quickly too expensive becomes essential when the alternative is collapse. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, sleeves rolled, blazer off. Not triumphant, not vengeful. Just steady. I thought of Mitchell, of the email that ended my career, and the policy he tried to disguise as a cost-cutting line item. And now I was holding the red pen, the one they once tried to take from me. They paid me $720 an hour, not because they wanted to, because they had to, because the only thing more expensive than my insurance was the cost of me catching them again, and I made sure they knew it. The furniture stayed the same. The lobby was still decorated with glossy brochures and artificial plants. But now there was soft jazz playing overhead. The new receptionist wore a pastel blazer, the kind HR consultants call approachable. There were even flyers on the front desk that read, "We hear you, we value you." But the floor beneath? Still the same concrete, still the same cracks. They'd just painted over them. The new leadership brought buzzwords: transparency, accountability, reform. The COO was fresh from a tech startup in Seattle. The new director of legal affairs came with glowing overseas credentials. But the first 10 policies I reviewed still reeked of the old system: soft loopholes, evasive language, benefit phrasing that turned denial into miscommunication. I didn't yell, didn't slam my hand on the table. I just circled the red flags, attached a 3-line memo: non-compliant, needs clarification. Within a month, they stopped testing me. I spent most of my days in silence, reviewing, revising, rewriting. It was meditative, like rebuilding an engine, piece by piece, in total quiet. Some staff avoided me at first. Maybe they didn't know what to say to the woman who once disappeared in the middle of a Tuesday. Maybe they feared I was here to clean house. But slowly, that shifted. A nod in a meeting. A question in the hallway. Once, someone slipped an email under my office door with a sticky, "Note that read, I don't know if this is wrong, but it feels off." Those moments, they mattered more than applause. They meant people were starting to notice for themselves. One Thursday afternoon, I was reviewing a proposal for a new wellness reimbursement plan. Pretty standard language. Vague, but salvageable. Then a knock. Soft one. Door already open. A young man stood there, no older than 22, lanyard around his neck, oversized backpack slung awkwardly on one shoulder. "Hi," he said, voice cracking. "I'm Marcus. I'm shadowing Beth from legal this week. She said I could ask questions if that's okay." "Of course," I said, leaning back. He stepped in, took a breath like he'd been holding it all day, then asked, "Is it true you almost brought the company down?" The air went still. I set down my pen and smiled. Not smug, not sharp. Just soft. Measured. "No," I said. "I just made them clean it up." That night, I walked the floors I hadn't seen in months. The break room still smelled like scorched coffee. The third-floor printer still jammed if you didn't hit the tray just right. But I saw something new in the eyes of the people walking those halls. Not fear, curiosity, respect, even gratitude. They didn't know the full story, but they knew enough. And that was more than I ever thought I'd have, because I had walked out of this place erased. And now, I was the signature that couldn't be ignored. The hallway looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was just perspective. Or maybe that's what happens when you stop being afraid of a place. You shrink it down to size. I was walking through the compliance wing on my way to the conference room. The same room where, not long ago, I'd been told I was too expensive to keep. No fanfare, no thank you, no gold watch or handshake. Just HR needs to see you, and a folder across the table. Now I was back, not as an employee, as the person who signed off on every policy before it left the room. The board had called a meeting, agenda, overhaul of internal ethics and benefit infrastructure. Translation: they needed visible change, and they wanted me to lead the presentation. Janet Grayson. Sat to my left, legal counsel to my right. The rest of the table filled with directors. Some I remembered from company newsletters, others I'd only known by email signature. Most had never looked me directly in the eye before today. Now, they couldn't look anywhere else. The projector whirred as I clicked through slides. Each one outlined a new protocol, drafted under my supervision. Clear, enforceable, unapologetic. When I finished, the room went silent. Not a tense silence, a sober one. The kind of silence that happens when everyone knows there's nothing left to argue. Then the door opened. I heard the footsteps before I saw him. Mitchell. Hair grayer, suit looser. He looked smaller somehow, like someone who had been carrying too much weight for too long and finally dropped it. He didn't look at me. Just walked to the far end of the table and sat. Consulting advisor. That was his new title. A face-saving role for someone no longer welcome in decision-making rooms. He had no laptop, no documents, just a legal pad and a pen he never clicked. Janet acknowledged him without warmth. "Mitchell, thank you for joining. While we appreciate your historical insight, today's session will be led by Grace Thompson. She holds compliance authority for all revisions moving forward." That was it. I turned toward him briefly. He nodded. I nodded back. No apology, no explanation, just the quiet agreement of two people who understood how far things had shifted. After the meeting ended, I stayed behind to collect my notes. A few board members stopped by to shake my hand. One, a younger guy I hadn't met before, paused and said, "You're the reason I joined the ethics committee. We needed someone like you 10 years ago." I smiled, quiet and small. That was enough. Out in the hallway, I passed the old HR office. New nameplate. Inside, a young woman was speaking to someone who looked nervous. First week jitters, probably. She reminded me of myself. Back when I thought doing the right thing would always be enough. I kept walking. Back in my apartment that night, I poured a glass of red wine and opened the drawer where I kept the documents. That changed everything. The original termination letter, the first flagged email, the hush money offer, my signed ethics supervisor contract. Each one had a weight. Each one told a part of the story. I closed the drawer without taking anything out. I didn't need to anymore. A week later, I got a visit from a new intern named Haley. She showed up to ask about reimbursement protocols, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. After I explained the section she was stuck on, I asked gently, "How are you finding the team so far?" She smiled. "Honestly, it feels safe here. Everyone says the ethics division has teeth now." I chuckled. "Good, that's the idea." Then I noticed the cover of her notebook. Scrawled in black marker was a phrase, "Be the one who says something." I didn't ask where she got it. I already knew. By the end of the month, I stood again at the head of the same conference table, presenting a final report on 12 new safeguards, all implemented under my oversight. No one questioned it. No one dared. Because I wasn't the woman they could ignore. Anymore. I was the one they reported to. The one who'd been erased. And then returned. Not for revenge, for repair. And when I signed the last page of the compliance package, I glanced at the empty chair at the end of the table. Mitchell's old seat. And I said quietly, only to myself, barely a whisper, "They erased me for $720 a month. Now they pay me 10 times that to make sure no one ever gets erased again." A few weeks later, I visited the legal department's document archive for a surprise inspection, not to catch anyone off guard, but to remind them I existed. The director greeted me with respect, even deference. I reviewed a random sampling of recent policy drafts, scanned approvals, cross-referenced timestamps, all clean. But I still circled one item in red. It was subtle. Language around a pilot, cost-scaling program for prescriptions. Soft phrasing, nothing overt. But I'd seen that kind of slipperiness before. I circled the paragraph and wrote, "Clarify intent. Submit for ethics review." By the time I left, the whole floor felt quieter. Not tense. Attentive. That's the thing about holding power. No one thought you'd ever reach. You don't have to raise your voice. You just have to show up. Some days, I walked the halls just to remind them I was still here, not to intimidate, not to spy. Just to be visible. Because once you've been disappeared, there's something powerful about being seen. Not as a relic. Not as a rumor. But as the red pen that now had the final say. I didn't decorate my office. No photo frames, no ferns. Just a locked drawer containing two things, my termination letter and the original hush offer. I didn't keep them for drama. I kept them for focus. Every time someone submitted a vague benefit revision or tried to backdoor a cost-neutral shift, in coverage, I'd remember what it felt like to sit in that elevator with a dead badge in my hand. That memory was sharper than any agenda item. My new contract was 12 pages long. I had read every word, twice. Redlined 3 clauses, insisted on a handwritten addendum at the end. All policy changes must be reviewed by Grace Thompson prior to executive approval. No exceptions. They signed it without comment, because they didn't want me back. They needed me back. I wasn't part of the machine anymore. I was the one who audited the machine. Every major update, every benefit realignment, every memo trying to shave dollars. Off reimbursement thresholds now landed in my inbox, and if it smelled even slightly off, it died there. The office was cleaner now, not perfect, but less infected. The people had changed, new hires, younger teams, fresh eyes. But the printer on the 3rd floor still jammed if you didn't hit the tray just right. The break room still smelled like overcooked microwave meals and too much Splenda and cheap coffee. And still, on some days, I caught people whispering when I walked by. Not because they feared me, because they knew I wouldn't look away. It was early spring when I received a new quarterly submission packet. It looked routine. Wellness adjustments, telehealth expansions, ergonomic stipends. But one line caught my attention. Streamline claims by leveraging data efficiency measures. That sounded benign, but it was just vague enough to be dangerous. I highlighted the phrase and requested documentation. What came back was a proposal to consolidate claim responses using an AI system that flagged low-priority services for batch denial. Mental health sessions, preventative screenings, sleep studies, all marked as review not required. It was just the old game in a new wrapper. I circled the page, wrote, "Rejected, unethical prioritization protocol," and returned it to the sender with a reminder. AI may scale fast, but so does harm. That afternoon, Janet Grayson emailed, "Me personally, saw your flag. Thank you for catching it early." That was it. But it told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't just a buffer now, I was a wall. 2 weeks later, a junior analyst named Priya from HR asked to shadow me for a day. I said yes. She showed up early, notebook in hand, eyes bright, and nervous. She asked smart questions, took notes like every sentence might be important. She reminded me of myself, 20 years ago, when I still thought compliance was about forms and fine print. By the end of the day, she looked at me across my desk and said, "I want to do what you do someday." I smiled and replied, "I hope you don't have to." She tilted her head. "Because it's hard?" "No," I said. "Because if we do this right, the next version of this job won't need to exist." That night, I stood by my window and watched the city flicker. So many buildings lit from the inside. So many people working late under fluorescent lights, trusting their companies to do the right thing. Most of them would never know how close they came to losing something essential. Therapy reimbursement, a prenatal visit, a partner's cancer screening, all nearly erased by spreadsheets and silence. But not this time. A few days later, I received a message from Leonard Granger. Not an email this time. A typed letter, hand-delivered, no logo, no header, just his words. "I regret that I didn't stand up when I saw the early signs. You did what I didn't. Thank you for finishing what I started." I sat with that letter for a long time, then folded it and placed it next to the others in the drawer. My collection of truths. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There was no press conference, no ticker tape parade, just a Thursday morning meeting where another proposal landed in front of me, and I opened it with the same practiced calm I'd earned through fire. The language was clean. Clear, fair. I signed it. One of the first policy updates in 3 years that required zero red ink. Progress isn't a straight line. It's a slow unraveling of the old and the careful stitching of something better. Later that afternoon, I passed a familiar hallway, the one with all the framed company awards. At the end of it stood the elevator where I'd once lost everything. Cardboard box in my hands, heart in my throat. Badge dead. I paused. The doors slid. Open, empty. I didn't step in. Instead, I turned around, walked the long way back, through the center of the office, through the desks, the faces. The new generation. They watched me now not like I was dangerous, but like I was the reason the building still stood. The room looked smaller now. Maybe it was the angle. Maybe it was me. I was seated at the head of the table in the main boardroom, the same table where I'd once been handed my walking papers with a sterile nod and a severance packet. The same table that saw 2 decades of my work dismissed in less time than a coffee break. Now, I was holding the agenda. The meeting was about reforms, ethics infrastructure, benefits transparency, internal oversight protocols. The fallout had made those buzzwords urgent again. Around the table sat the board, legal counsel, 2 policy advisors. A few of them gave tight nods when I walked in. Others glanced down at their folders like they were afraid of what I might find. They weren't wrong to be nervous. The projector hummed softly as I flipped through the presentation. A clear, detailed map of what the next 6 months would look like under my oversight, streamlined audit trails, third-party compliance checkpoints, employee access to real-time claim status, Anonymous internal reporting built directly into the HR system. No fluff. No jargon. Just clarity. When I finished, the silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was respectful. Then the door opened. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Mitchell. I felt his presence before I saw his shadow stretch across the polished wood of the table. He didn't look the same. His hair was thinner, silver at the temples. His suit hung a little looser. The confidence he once wore like armor had dulled to something quieter. He took the open seat near the end of the table. No fanfare, no attention. A consulting advisor now, called in not for power, but optics. He kept his eyes low. No laptop, just a notepad. Janet addressed him calmly. Mitchell, thank you for joining. Please note that Grace is leading this meeting under direct board authority. That was all. No ceremonial handoff, no reconciliation arc. Just a simple reversal. The man who erased me now took notes at the far end of a table I controlled. When the meeting ended, most of the board shuffled out with polite goodbyes. I gathered my folders slowly, my mind already on the next steps. As I turned to leave, one of the directors, someone new, mid-30s, sharp suit, quiet demeanor, stopped me. "You're the reason I joined the ethics committee," he said. "Honestly, we needed someone like you 10 years ago." I thanked him with a nod. I wasn't one for speeches anymore. I walked down the corridor past the new HR office. The door had a different nameplate now. Inside, a young woman was helping someone who looked unsure of where to go. A new hire, maybe. She reminded me of me, 20 years younger, full of hope that following the rules would always be enough. I didn't interrupt. Just kept moving. At home that night, I sat at the kitchen counter with a glass of wine and opened the drawer. Inside, the letter that fired me, the flagged email that started the unraveling, the hush offer, and my signed contract as lead ethics supervisor. Each one had its own gravity, but I didn't need to read them, not anymore. I slid the drawer shut. A week later, a new hire, Haley, popped into my office holding a notepad and a copy of the employee handbook. She looked nervous. Asked about the language around benefit appeals. I explained the clause, then asked, "How are you settling in?" She smiled. "Honestly, it feels safe here. Everyone says this department is real now. Like, it's got teeth." I chuckled. "That's the idea." Then I noticed the edge of her notepad, a handwritten quote in black marker. "Be the one who says something." I didn't need to ask where she got it. Some truths echo all by themselves. On the last Thursday of the month, I stood again at the head of the boardroom table. 12 new safeguards, all under my watch, all approved without hesitation. No one pushed back. No one even asked to reword anything. I signed the last page, a pen stroke I once feared I'd never hold again. Then I looked up and met Janet's eyes across the table. She gave a small nod, something between respect and gratitude. I glanced toward the empty seat Mitchell once filled. Just an ordinary chair now, and I whispered to no one in particular, "They erased me for $720 a month. Now they pay me 10 times that to make sure no one else disappears." I didn't choose that number for symbolism. I chose it for precision. It was what they once called unsustainable. Now it was what they paid for accountability. My job wasn't to be liked, it was to be heard, to stand between corporate convenience and human consequence. And every time a new policy landed on my desk with too much fog and not enough light, I sharpened my red pen, not to punish, to protect. The faces changed, but the foundation stayed the same. New leadership had arrived. They brought polished resumes and polished phrases, transparency, cultural reset, employee-first values. There was a new COO from a Seattle tech firm, and a legal affairs director with a gleaming international track record. Their arrival, was met with cautious optimism. But as I sifted through their first wave of proposed policy updates, the same patterns started to peek through. Soft language, vague obligations, encourage instead of require, streamline instead of disclose. It wasn't evil, it wasn't malicious, it was inertia. Corporate DNA doesn't rewrite itself just because the executive faces change. They were still testing the limits, just slower now, softer. I didn't argue. I didn't write memos in bold. I simply circled the sentences that needed clarity, scrawled non-compliant, needs revision in the margins, and slid the packet back across the table. Within weeks, the tone changed. They stopped testing the edges because they understood, finally, that this division didn't exist for decoration. Most of my days were spent in silence. Reading. Redlining. Rewriting. There was something satisfying about the quiet routine, like tuning an engine that no one noticed until it sputtered. I didn't need recognition. I wasn't here to collect plaques. I was here to make sure no one else vanished behind euphemisms and spreadsheets. Some staff still avoided me, others nodded respectfully. Quiet approval, never loud praise. Once in a while, someone would knock, gently step into my office and whisper, "I have something I think you should see." That meant more than anything, because it meant the culture had started to change, not with press releases, with courage. On a gray afternoon, I was reviewing a proposal about the new employee wellness subsidy program when someone knocked. It was a young intern, Marcus. He hovered in the doorway, his oversized backpack slouched against one shoulder. "Hi. I was wondering if I could ask something personal?" I leaned back in my chair. "Go ahead." He stepped in cautiously, closing, the door behind him. "Is it true? You almost brought the company down?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, really looked at him, fresh out of college, new to all this, still thinking in black and white. "No," I said finally. "I just made them clean it up." His shoulders relaxed slightly. Then he smiled, small and uncertain, and left the room. And I knew he'd remember that answer longer than anything he learned in onboarding. Later that week, I walked through the office after hours. The lights were dim, the desks mostly empty. It was quiet enough to hear the hum of the vending machine near the break room, the same one that had once eaten my change every Thursday like clockwork. I passed framed company values on the wall, once hollow, now slightly, heavier with meaning, because now someone actually enforced them. I paused in front of a familiar hallway, narrow, carpet worn thin in the center. At the end stood the elevator, the same one where I'd tried to swipe my deactivated badge, where I'd realized I no longer existed in the system I helped build. The elevator dinged and opened, empty. I didn't step in. Instead, I turned and walked the long way back, through the maze of desks, past the people who now looked at me not with suspicion, but with something closer to trust. Because I wasn't the one who told them what to do. I was the one who stayed when it mattered. I stood in the doorway of the ethics office the next morning, sipping coffee, and watched the floor wake up. Some people didn't even glance my way. Others nodded. One or two smiled, and I smiled back. Not because I needed their approval, but because I had become the reason they could do their jobs without fear of being erased. For doing the right thing, the room at the top of the building, the boardroom, looked no different. Still long, still cold, still too much glass and not enough warmth. But I didn't flinch when I walked into it now. This time, we weren't discussing crisis control. This time, we were reviewing the one-year ethics report I had authored. My signature on the cover. My systems, in place. My audit trail, clean, verified, bulletproof. Janet Grayson leaned in after I finished my summary and said, Your department has become the gold standard. That wasn't easy. I didn't thank her. I just nodded and replied, it was necessary. Back in my office, I unlocked the drawer one last time, pulled out the termination letter, held it for a second, folded it in half, and tucked it behind the signed ethics appointment. Contract. No longer at the top, but at the bottom, where memories belong once they've done their job. My final meeting that month was with the entire policy committee. We reviewed 15 proposed updates. 11 passed. 4 came back for rework. No one protested. No one tried to sneak anything in. Not anymore. Because I wasn't the woman they walked out of the building with a cardboard box in her hands. I was the one holding the pen now, the last line of defense, the one they couldn't silence. Not with money, not with fear, not even with time. And as I stood by the window that overlooked the skyline, sun setting, city blinking to life below, I thought of the mug I'd once packed into a box, the one that said, still here, still kicking. And I smiled, because now, I wasn't just still here. I was the reason others could be too. They called me in at 2:15 p.m. No heads up, no calendar ping, just a sharp knock on the side of my cubicle and someone muttering, HR needs to see you for a minute. I actually thought it was my annual performance review. Why wouldn't I? That day marked my 21st work anniversary. I even wore my navy blazer, the same one I had on when I got promoted to senior compliance officer 10 years ago. When I walked into the small HR meeting room, Mitchell was already sitting there. No smile. His hands were clasped together on the table, elbows locked like he was bracing for a legal deposition. Across from him sat Hannah from HR, staring at a closed folder like it might bite. Mitchell cleared his throat. Grace, he began, his voice as flat as printer paper. This isn't easy, but the company is going through a lean restructuring. I blinked. He continued. Your benefits package. It's just too expensive to maintain. Wait. What? Then, he looked me dead in the eyes and dropped the line that would echo in my head for months. Your insurance is costing the company $720 a month. That's not sustainable. I sat there waiting for the rest, for the part where they'd acknowledge my spotless record, or maybe mention how I've been here longer than anyone else on the floor. But there was nothing else. Just numbers. Just a manila folder sliding across the table and a severance package that boiled down to 2 weeks' pay and a gag clause. No training my replacement. No transition, because they didn't need a replacement. Everything I used to do was being divvied up between 2 or 3 junior staffers. Half the salary, none of the experience. Most of them had never even seen a regulatory audit report, let alone managed one. I packed in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just placed my Compliance Queen mug in a cardboard box, the same one I used to sip out of while reading case law during lunch, and tried to breathe past the static in my chest. And then my phone buzzed, and automated email sent to the entire company. Congratulations to Grace Thompson on 21 incredible years at Olmed Solutions. We are grateful for her dedication, passion, and unwavering integrity. I stared at it, read it 3 times, then deleted it. On my way to the elevator, I passed Jason, the new hire in data ops. Just last week, I had covered for a huge compliance oversight he made. He got a promotion. You still here? He asked with a grin. I didn't answer. They kept him because he had energy. Mitchell's words. Fresh blood, he called it. Apparently, integrity costs too much. Hannah said, I had 30 minutes to leave. Like it was normal. Like erasing 21 years of service could just fit in between lunch and the 2:45 staff meeting. She handed me a cardboard box. Didn't look me in the eye. Mumbled something about deactivating my badge soon. I walked back to my desk like a ghost. No one asked what happened. They already knew. Or worse, they pretended they didn't. The office felt foreign. My name was still etched on the glass wall outside the compliance department. It looked like a sticker now, a placeholder. My desk still had printouts of reports I had been working on that morning. My chair still had the lumbar pillow I'd brought from home, but everything felt off. I packed a framed photo of my son at graduation. The plant I stubbornly kept alive even when I was too tired to water it, and the mug they gave me at my 15-year anniversary. It said, "Still here, still kicking." The irony burned. People walked by. No one stopped. Even Linda, my Tuesday lunch buddy, glanced over and walked faster. Guilt moves quicker than sympathy in a corporate hallway. I gave the office one last look, then stepped into the elevator. The door closed. I tried to swipe my badge. A soft beep. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. I had to ask someone walking by to press the ground floor button for me. They didn't say a word, like I didn't exist anymore. When the elevator finally opened, the grief hit me like a flood, hot sharp, right behind my ribs. I blinked hard. I refused to cry in that elevator. I sat in the lobby. Same marble floors. Same framed artwork meant to make the space feel upscale and not sterile. But it all felt unreal, like I was watching it through a glass wall I couldn't touch. And then I saw it, buried under the folders in my box. An email printout. It wasn't addressed to me. But when I unfolded it, I saw the header. To M. Spencer, CEO. From D. Lawson, Legal. Subject, Compliance Review flagged risk attachment. Internal policy deviation flagged by G.T. Thompson. The body was short. Her warning puts us at risk. Get her out before this escalates. Monsieur Mitchell. My breath hitched. This wasn't about my insurance costs. This wasn't about restructuring. They fired me because I saw something. And I said something. They didn't just remove me from payroll. They scrubbed me from the system, from memory, from the story. But someone forgot to shred this one document. And that changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, phone glowing inches from my face, scrolling through emails I technically shouldn't have had access to anymore. My company inbox? Shut down. But my backups, old, clunky, rarely synced right, were still on a drive. I'd made them as part of my routine audit prep. Never thought I'd need them for this. I told myself I wasn't searching for anything in particular. But that was a lie. I wanted to find proof. Something to confirm what I already suspected. This wasn't about a $720 insurance premium. It was about silence, control, fear. And at 3:04 a.m., I found it. The subject line looked innocuous. Policy update. Reimbursements review. Dated 6 weeks. Before I was let go. The body of the message? Just a couple of lines. But the attached thread was what made my stomach drop. Mitchell had responded to an internal suggestion to quietly trim down the list of reimbursable medical expenses, mental health visits, physical therapy, prescriptions, no official notice, employees. Would only find out when their claims got denied. His reply, if we can cut even 8-10% off monthly payouts without triggering compliance flags, do it. Fast, quiet. There it was. And just below, my own email, the one I'd sent in response, had flagged the legal risk, quoted the exact language from employee protection statutes, warned them that making unilateral changes to medical benefits without disclosure could be considered fraudulent concealment. No one replied, but clearly someone read it. Because above my warning was a fresh reply, forwarded to Mitchell and Legal, marked, high priority. Her note is a problem. Get her out before this escalates. I sat up in bed, heart pounding like a drum. At the bottom of that email thread sat a PDF file. Just one page. Title, Cost Saving Adjustments, Phase 3, a simple grid, Columns listing employee reimbursements. Rows marked with red X's mental health services, post-op physical therapy, cancer screening follow-ups, prescription copay caps. Each. One crossed out. At the bottom, in bold, confidential. Do not circulate outside this thread. This wasn't mismanagement. It wasn't a budget oversight. It was deliberate, cold, calculated. They knew exactly what they were doing, cutting off critical health services while keeping employees in the dark. And when I spoke up, even gently, they erased me. Not because I was wrong, but because I was right. I stared at my laptop screen until my eyes stung. Rage swelled inside me, slow and steady, like a kettle just beginning to boil. All those people I worked with, the ones who looked away on my last day, the company-wide email that thanked me for dedication and integrity, the hollow words that tried to frame my departure like a retirement party, they didn't know. Or maybe they did, and chose comfort over conscience. Either way, I wasn't deleting this thread. Not this time. By morning, the rage had cooled into something sharper, not anger. Focus. I sat at the kitchen table, my chipped coffee mug in one hand, my laptop open in front of me. Then I pulled out my phone and searched a name I hadn't thought about in years. Dana Myers. Corporate. Compliance attorney. She audited Olmed back in 2017 after a state inspector flagged some shady vendor contracts. Most people didn't like her. She was blunt, brutal, brilliant, but I respected her. She didn't blink. Didn't play politics, and when I handed her full documentation within 24 hours of her request, she'd said something over lunch I never forgot. "You're the cleanest operator I've met in a dirty system." I had laughed then. Now? It hit. Different. I texted her. "Dana, it's Grace Thompson. I need to talk." 3 minutes later, she replied, "I'll call you in 10. Right on the dot, my phone lit up. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, crisp, no fluff. Like every word had clearance. "Tell me what you've got," she said. So I did. The firing, the flag document, the email thread, the PDF. I tried to keep my voice steady, but something in her tone, icy, measured, made it easier to hold mine, firm. When I got to the line in the attachment, "Do not circulate outside this thread," she interrupted. "You have that PDF?" "I do. Don't send it. Not yet. Meet me, today, 3 p.m., my office." "Wait, that soon?" "Grace," she said. "You don't understand what you're holding." Her office was in a converted brownstone in the legal district. 2 floors, no sign. Hardwood floors that creaked when you walked too fast. It didn't. Looked like a war room, but it was. Dana stood at a wide oak table, folders spread out like a battlefield. She didn't look up when I walked in. Just said, "Coffee's on the right. Sit." I did. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, labeled OSI, Internal Exposure. I blinked. "OSI?" "Olmed Solutions, Inc.," she replied, flipping the folder open. "I've been building this for 2 years." "Why?" I asked, stunned. She met my eyes, voice steady. "Because they've been skating the edge for a decade. And I've had whistleblowers, vendors, employees, even a state worker, come to me anonymously. But no one had the receipts, just whispers." She paused. "Your file?" "That completes the circle." I swallowed hard. "You were waiting for someone. Like me?" "No," she said, meeting my gaze. "I was waiting for you." That stopped me cold. I sat there, staring at her, trying to absorb what she just said, waiting for the dramatic music cue that never came. Dana didn't deal in theatrics. Just facts. Just the kind of brutal, clean truth you can't unhear. She pulled up 3 tabs on her laptop and turned the screen toward me. Tab 1, a report from 2020 detailing vendor manipulation, price skimming, duplicate payments, and adjusted deliverables. Tab. 2. A resignation letter from a compliance officer in HR. The tone was polite, but the subtext was nuclear. She'd questioned medical benefit denials, and 2 weeks later, she was reassigned to inventory management. She left quietly 6 months after that. Tab 3. An internal memo from a state regulator's audit flagged inconclusive due to lack of transparency. Redacted names, blacked out paragraphs, but a timestamp and file trail that matched Olmed's quarterly reports exactly. Each piece was suspicious. Together, they formed a pattern. A story. "I've been watching for someone clean," Dana said. "Someone whose name appears on policy approvals, who wasn't afraid to push back, until the system pushed them out." She pointed to the screen again. "Your digital signature was the last one on nearly every policy document before the last round of benefit changes. After that? Nothing. They stopped routing through you because they knew you wouldn't sign off." "So what now?" I asked. She didn't miss a beat. "Now we go private. We gather, we verify. Then we go public." "Class action?" I asked. "If we have enough people, yes. If not, we file under whistleblower statutes. Either way, this doesn't stay hidden." Then she slid an envelope across. The table, no label, just plain white. Inside was a prepaid flip phone and a USB drive. "Don't use your cell," she said. "Don't access anything from your home Wi-Fi. And Grace?" I looked up. "If you go forward with this, there's no one ringing the bell." I looked down at the flash drive, then back at her. I didn't flinch. I nodded. "Clear cold. Ready." I never imagined myself sneaking around like a spy at 52, but that's exactly what it felt like. Dana's burner phone felt like a ticking bomb in my purse. I only used it at the public library where the Wi-Fi was slow but anonymous. I parked 4 blocks away, wore sunglasses, a hat. Not because I thought anyone would recognize me, but because secrecy changes how you walk, how you breathe. My job was simple at first. Catalog everything I had, old emails, policy memos, redline drafts of benefit guidelines. Some of it came from my audit archives. I always kept personal backups for prep. Now those files, once just dull bits of protocol, had teeth. Dana set up a secure vault, encrypted and triple authenticated. I uploaded everything. I labeled each folder carefully. 3. 2022. Reimbursement adjustments. Mitchell email. Threads, silent approvals policy changes. No compliance signature. Then I made a separate folder. Ghost signatures. These were approvals with my digital ID that I'd never seen before. Documents I hadn't reviewed, hadn't signed, but somehow had my name attached. That's when the unease in my gut hardened into something else. This wasn't just fraud. This was identity theft of my professional name, my credibility. Dana worked like a machine. Within 3 days, she'd reached out to 4 former employees, people I remembered vaguely, ones who had just vanished. The first was Marcus Taylor. He handled internal audits until he suddenly left in 2020. No goodbye email, no farewell cake. At the time, people said he had burned out. Turns out, Marcus had refused to alter his findings to make vendor payment discrepancies look like rounding errors. After that, HR flagged him for performance concerns and shuffled him out with a broken contract and a reputation left in tatters. We talked over Zoom. "I always remembered you," he said. "You were the only one who ever asked for source data instead of summaries. I thought you were just too clean for that place." Another was Charlene Vu, a junior analyst in the risk division. She'd questioned a spike in claim denials for mental health services. Weeks later, she was moved to the front desk. "They didn't fire me," she said. "They made me irrelevant." Each story was a domino. Each person had been pushed out for seeing too much. And then we got the message. Dana received it late one night through an anonymous encrypted channel. No name, no signature, just a sender alias, black box. The email had a single attachment, internal reimbursement analysis, Q1205. We opened it together over a secure call. She didn't speak at first, just scrolled in silence. This, Dana said finally, voice low and tense. This is worse than what we thought. The document spelled it out. Claim denials were up 38% in a single quarter. Most were services that were supposed to be covered. Mental, health counseling, post-maternity care, prescription subsidies, cancer screening follow-ups. It wasn't human error. It was systemic. Someone had programmed the system to auto-reject certain codes. No flag. No alert. Just cold silence. Employees would only know when their reimbursements never showed up, and most wouldn't know how to fight it. At the bottom of the page, in small italicized text, internal flag, do not include these denials in monthly summaries unless specifically requested by external audit. They weren't just hiding the truth. They were burying it, and someone inside was starting to dig. Dana's voice came through again. Calm. Controlled. The sound of a match being struck. This just became a war. And for the first time since, the day I'd been walked out of that building, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. I hadn't realized how loud paranoia could get. Every click of a door latch sounded like a threat. Every unexpected phone call twisted my stomach into knots. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like it had ears now. It started 3 days after. Dana received the black box file. I was walking back to my car from a quick grocery run. Bag of lemons in one hand, keys in the other, when I noticed something strange. The driver's side mirror had been folded in. I never did that. Ever. And the windows, cleaner than usual. Too clean. Like someone had wiped off their prints. I froze. Looked. Around. The lot was nearly empty. Just one vehicle caught my eye, a beat-up white pickup idling by the exit. Windows tinted so dark I couldn't see the driver. I looked away quickly and kept moving. Inside, everything looked the same. The seat was adjusted to my height, radio presets untouched. But when I popped the trunk to throw in my groceries, I saw it, my old leather briefcase. I hadn't opened it in weeks. But the zipper was slightly undone. Files shifted. Not stolen, just disturbed. Like someone had rifled through it, then put it back. I slammed the trunk shut, heart pounding, and drove home gripping the wheel like it could anchor me to something real. Every red light felt like an ambush. When I got home, I double-locked the door, checked the windows, drew the curtains. That night, it got worse. At 11:28 p.m., my burner phone buzzed, unknown number, one message. You don't know who you're messing with. Just that. No threats. No curse words. Just cold implication. My hands went numb. The weight of that sentence was heavier than anything else that week. I stared at it, frozen, like the phone might bite. Then I called Dana. She picked up on the second ring. You got something? She asked. No, I whispered. Someone got to me. I told her everything, the car, the files, the message. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then she said, Grace, if they had anything real, they'd be suing you by now. This is fear, intimidation. They want to rattle you. Well, I said, forcing a bitter laugh. It's working. Don't let it, she replied. Keep moving. Smarter, slower, less alone. The next day, I changed everything. Parked in different lots, used rideshare to reach the library, wore a hoodie, kept my head down, switched out my flip phone. It felt ridiculous. Like I was playing a part in some low-budget thriller. But fear has a way of rewiring your instincts. Then came the part that hurt worse than any stranger's message. Someone I trusted turned away. Stephanie Chang. Another compliance analyst. We had lunch together nearly every week for 5 years. She once called me the firewall of our department. I texted her, "Hey Steph, can we talk? I just need someone to hear me out." No reply. Hours passed, then finally, "Stop. This isn't worth it." Followed by, "This contact has been blocked." Stared at the screen. Numb. It wasn't just fear now, it was isolation. People weren't just scared. They were disappearing, closing their doors, choosing silence. And I couldn't even blame them. Not everyone is built for the dark. But I wasn't. Stepping back. Because once someone opens the trunk of your life and starts digging, there's no such thing as going back to normal. You either bury the truth again, or you pull it all the way out. By the end of that week, I couldn't tell if I was being careful or paranoid. I avoided cafes. Stopped wearing perfume. Somehow it felt like it made me traceable. The silence was heavy, until Dana brought up a name I hadn't heard in a while. Kellen Grant. "Who?" I asked. "Investigative journalist. Broke the Denver VA fraud case in 2019. Smart, careful. He protects his sources." Going to the press felt like stepping off a cliff. Talking to Dana in secret was one thing. Letting my story bleed into the public? That was a whole different beast. "They'll know it's me," I whispered. "Eventually," Dana said. "But not right away. Let's do this smart." She arranged a virtual meeting. Kellen's face appeared on my laptop screen. Square jaw, rolled up sleeves, a look like he'd wrestled giants before and was ready to do it again. "I understand your concerns," he said. "I don't publish anything I can't triple verify, and I never ever expose my sources." We spent over an hour walking through everything: the email thread, the silent denials, the forged approvals, the confidential PDFs. He asked questions that cut deep, clear, specific, focused. "Do you still have access to the redacted summaries?" "No, but I saw the originals. I'd recognize tampering." "Could you testify to that?" "If I had to?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, then said, "Let's start with the truth." 3 days later, the article dropped. It wasn't a headline explosion, no front-page exposé, but it was sharp, devastating, controlled. Senior Compliance, Officer fired after warning of insurance fraud. By Kellen Grant, The Ledger. The article didn't name me, but my fingerprints were all over it. An anonymous source, a fired compliance officer, internal documents showing silent benefit denials, a quote from a source close to the investigation saying, "The company was more focused on reducing payouts than protecting employees." It hit harder than we expected. Dana's phone lit up that same afternoon, calls from ex-employees, lawyers, compliance watchdogs. People were paying attention. And then that night, another. Message Proton Mail, no subject line, no name, just a single sentence. "You're right. I can back you up." I froze, my heart thudded. I scrambled through old emails, searched archives. Then I found it, Leonard Granger, former VP of Legal Affairs at Olmed. He'd retired abruptly last year. No fanfare, no explanation. He'd always been distant, but not unfriendly, ethical, careful. And now? He was watching. Dana confirmed it. Headers clean, real encryption. "He's not just agreeing with you," she said. "He's opening a door." I wanted to press forward. Dana held up a hand. Let him come to us. So we waited, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. Because the wall, I thought, it would bury me, it had started to crack. The headline changed everything. It was a foggy Wednesday morning. I had just sat down with a cup of coffee, still in my pajamas, hair pulled into a careless bun, when I opened my laptop to check on Kellen's follow-up. And there it was, CNN whistleblower. Exposes internal insurance fraud at Olmed Solutions. My coffee nearly slipped from my hands. The subheading punched harder. Exclusive documents suggest intentional benefit denials and retaliatory termination of senior compliance officer. Beneath it, screenshots of redacted emails, but one name had been left intact. G. Thompson, followed by the subject line that started, "It all, policy deviation, legal risk." Concern it quoted excerpts from the Ledger article and expanded on them. Employee testimonials. Audit trail disappearances. Internal directives to avoid triggering state oversight. The word criminal wasn't printed anywhere, but it hovered in every sentence. I sat there, frozen. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from old coworkers, college, friends. My sister, who'd never even cared about my job, messaged, "Grace, is this real? Is this you? You're on the front page of Google News." Donna called 15 minutes later. Her voice was calm, but I could hear it, that rare edge, in her tone that only shows when something big is happening. "They're panicking," she said. "The SEC just launched a preliminary inquiry. Office of Employee Benefits is reviewing the last 3 quarters. I didn't smile. Not really. But something inside me settled. A stillness. A sense of justice. Not revenge, just truth. Unburied. The real surprise came that afternoon. A courier showed up at my apartment with a thick envelope. No signature on the front, but I recognized the legal firm's letterhead, Olmed's Lawyers. I opened it and read the entire thing, twice, then once more for good measure. It was a proposed settlement, $95,000. That was the offer. In return, I would agree to voluntarily refrain from future media engagement or participation in pending or upcoming legal proceedings. In other words, shut up. Go away. There was even a line printed in bold. This offer is not an admission of wrongdoing and is made solely in the interest of restoring company stability and employee morale. I almost laughed. It wasn't damage control. It was desperation. Legal. Strategic. Reputational fear. They knew the storm had only just begun. I called Dana and read the letter out loud to her. She didn't even blink. "Standard tactic," she said. "Soft gag order. They're trying to buy time before the full fallout hits. What do you recommend?" "You already know." And I did, because this was never about money. It was about silence. About the people who got erased quietly, one by one. About power. And the kind of rot that hides under clean carpets in shiny boardrooms. I thought of every employee who came to me in confidence over the years, scared they'd lose coverage for their child's therapy or their spouse's medication. I had defended the system back then, believed in it. They were offering me hush money now, like that could undo it all, like $95,000 could erase the bruises, the lies, the betrayal. That evening, I got a message from Marcus Taylor, the former internal auditor Dana had reconnected, with, "Saw the news? I'm proud of you. They tried to break you, but you held the line." Then a PS that made me pause. "Mitchell is stepping down. Medical leave, apparently." Mitchell, the man who called me too expensive, the one who'd smiled as he handed me a folder and erased 2 decades in 30 minutes. Now he was gone? Dana confirmed it the next morning. "They're calling it a personal health sabbatical," she said. "But internally, he's out. Quietly, no announcement. He's radioactive now." I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel victorious, but I felt unburdened. They tried to erase me. Now their CEO had vanished into the same silence they once forced on me. And on my desk, the settlement offer sat, unopened, unsigned. They wanted my silence, but I'd finally learned how to speak. By Friday, the board blinked. Dana forwarded an email that came through her secure channel. It was cold, sterile. "The board is open to alternative resolutions. Please propose terms for consideration." They didn't want to offer me silence anymore. Now they wanted my terms. I sat with that line for almost an hour, just stared at it, letting it sink in. 2 months ago, they tossed me like a bad spreadsheet formula, a liability too expensive to keep. Now the board of directors wanted to negotiate. Not because they cared, but because they could see the damage. Class action interest had hit over 100 signatures. 2 federal regulators were circling. Shareholders were furious. Stock prices had dipped 9% in a week. And Mitchell? He was an industry punchline, and I was the person they never thought would matter this much. Dana had asked me once, early on, "What do you want when this is over?" I hadn't known then. Now I did. I opened a blank document, typed out my response. In bold 14-point Calibri.counteroffer, I declined the financial settlement. In lieu of payment, I propose appointment to a newly created role, Lead Ethics Supervisor. The role will hold full oversight of all internal policy drafts, insurance regulations, and benefit approvals. It will report directly to the board, not to executive leadership. The appointment will be public and irrevocable for 3 years. Starting compensation, $720 per hour. The silence from their side lasted 2 days. On day 3, Dana forwarded their reply, a scanned board memo. Some members laughed. One called it a publicity stunt. Another accused me of trying to humiliate the company. But one director, Janet Grayson, reached out separately. She asked for a private call. I answered. Her voice was clipped, formal but sincere. "We've reviewed your terms," she said. "The board understands the optics and the necessity." She paused. "If we move forward with this, we expect transparency, integrity, and frankly, damage control." I said nothing at first. Then quietly, "I'm not here to protect you. I'm here to protect the people you failed." To my surprise, she replied, "That's exactly why it has to be you." 5 days later, the announcement went live. OLMD appoints Grace Thompson as Lead Ethics Supervisor. Amid ongoing inquiry, I didn't smile, but I printed the article, folded it, placed it in the same folder that still held my termination letter. Little symmetry, a little justice. That morning, I walked back into the building that had erased me, not as an employee, as oversight, as the person who now reviewed every policy before it could ever hurt someone else. The first day back felt surreal. Same marble floors, same glass doors, same stale corporate scent, like polished wood and repressed tension. But everything felt quieter, tighter. The woman at the security desk handed me a new badge. Red border, custom ID, tier red, direct board clearance. I clipped it to my blazer and walked through the turnstile like a ghost returning to haunt her old life. The elevator felt slower than I remembered. Or maybe I was just aware of every second, every floor it passed. When the doors opened, I stepped into the newly built ethics office. It wasn't grand, just a clean corner suite, long table, 3 filing cabinets, a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. It didn't need to be a palace, it just needed to exist. That afternoon, I received my first official packet for review. Pages and pages of policy language, some old, some new, some already soaked in the same vague, weaponized legalese I used to fight against from inside the system, and then I saw it. A name. Mitchell. His name was still buried in the metadata. This was one of the last documents he had signed, before stepping down. The title, Benefits Realignment. Plan a revised policy. Buried on page 2 was a clause labeled, Outpatient Mental Health Optimization. I knew what that meant. I'd seen that language before. It was a dressed-up version of the exact same tactic they'd tried to sneak past me 6 months before they fired me. The same maneuver that silenced Charlene. That cracked Marcus. That forced me out. Only this time, it was coming across my desk for approval. They thought I'd sign it now that I had a title. I pulled out a red pen, 3 words, written in bold across the top page: rejected, in violation.